Hello, friends. I'm no therapist, but I'm your host, StephanieLGoodman. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman of faith. Often friends ask me how I have a successful marriage while blending families and staying optimistic in life. This podcast features people with real life stories about success in relationships and triumph over trial. As Memorial Day approaches, we are honored to share a true life story of a military wife who chooses to use her experiences to benefit others. My guest is Jessie Ellertson, life coach and host of the podcast Simply Resilient, where she shares her life skills to thrive in difficult times. Hello, friends. Welcome to a new edition of I'm No Therapist. But today I want to introduce to you a friend of mine. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and let me tell you, I just fell in love with her mission and could not wait to be able to have her on my podcast. So, Jessie, please
Hello.
introduce yourself to my audience a little bit. Tell us kind of your background and a little bit of your story, okay?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Jessie Ellertson, and I am a life coach for military wives. I'm the podcast host of the Simply Resilient podcast for military wives, and I am a military wife, if you can believe it. So that's a little bit of my what's the word there? My bio, but what my history is that my husband's in the Utah Army National Guard. And we have been in the military for 15 years. So I've been a military wife for 15 years. And we have 6 kids ranging in ages from 4 to 16. So we're doing, I still say we're doing toddlers and teenagers. I don't know if a 4-year-old is still considered a toddler, but I still sort of feel like that's what we're doing.
I agree that they are toddler. I mean, they're still
Till they
so
go to school, right?
independent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's in
Wow.
preschool, but
And put in their parentheses Wonder Woman, I think. My goodness. You're basically raising a family at home while your husband serves in the military, right?
Yeah. So he has to be gone a lot. Recently, we've changed one of our jobs where he's home a lot more, which has been amazing. But I would say for the bulk of our child raising years, he's been gone most of the time. And when I say that, what I mean is what's interesting about the National Guard is you have your military duties, but they're technically part-time. So then you have a full-time civilian career on the side of it. So he's a pilot in both places. He's a pilot in the National Guard. He flies helicopters, and then he's an airplane pilot in his civilian career.
Oh
But you can
my.
see how the combination of the two would make him be gone a lot.
Yeah.
So in the National Guard, you work 1 weekend a month, and then 2 weeks a year, and then you're deployable. And then for pilots, they go in and fly every week. So it was like a part-time job plus a little, and then he had his airline career on the side of that. So we just made a change in his civilian career where he's not flying for the airlines anymore. He's flying for a private individual, and so his schedule has been just amazing. He's home more. I love having him around. We had to adjust to it though. I'm used to running the show without him. And now that he's home more, I'm like, wait, you're here? Like, I have to consult with you? Your opinion gets involved in discipline and I'm used to just kind of updating him on what I'm doing because he's just in and out so much. But now that we're a little more used to it, it's been amazing.
Oh, so tell me how did you come to a place where this was going to be your story? Did you go into the marriage realizing that he was going to go into the service, or did this happen after you were married? And how did you come to a space of okay, this is going to be how it's happening?
Yeah, that's a really good question because often you do marry someone who's in the military, so you kind of know what you're getting into, but we were not. I was pregnant with our second when he came home and said, I'm joining the military. Now, I had heard him speak of it randomly over the years. So it didn't completely come out of the blue for me, but
Okay.
we were on a different track, and he was just very unhappy in that track, through just what he was studying in college and things like that, he just didn't see himself going. He couldn't envision that career path for him. And so he had been praying and seeking and searching and researching and just trying to figure out what he could envision himself doing for the next whatever years, and received his answer that it was the military, and came home to his pregnant wife. So I remember at the time, our first two are only 13 months apart, like, happy
What?
surprise. Happy surprise.
I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, it's
Oh my.
possible. So I'm holding my, I'm not gonna do the math right now, but 8-month-old,
Yeah.
and I'm 4 months pregnant or whatever, right? So
Wow.
I don't know if that math's right. Anyway, and he's like, "Honey, I'm gonna leave you." It was basically the way I heard him say those words to me. And I was like, how, what? Like, it was hard for me at first, but long story short, the thing that was a real big hang up for me was I just thought, how could we choose something that would cause our family to be apart so much? Like, how could that ever be a good thing for our family?
Purpose.
And
Yeah.
yes, and I had to do my own prayer and ponder and, go to the temple. And I'm figuratively fasted because I was pregnant, so I couldn't really fast. But
Yeah.
over about a month of struggling with it, I was able to come to my own answer that, like, no matter what we go through, like, we will do it together. We will keep ourselves close. We will, like, no matter what path you choose, there will be the ups and downs to it. And it's always going to be in our power to make the most of each part of it. And I just like really was able to open up to, like, this will be our story. Like, this, we can make this amazing for our family. And that was really empowering. And we've been on the same page ever since. And the military life, it's not for everybody, I would say, but it's been incredible for our family, like, incredible.
That is absolutely incredible. And I love that you went into a space of realizing you had to get your own answer.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
once you got your answer, then you chose full on to
Yep.
have the attitude that whatever comes together, we're going to do this together.
Oh yeah.
This
And
is going to be an amazing experience.
I've had to lean on that answer in the hardest moments of military life. I was like,
Mhm.
remember how my father said we could make this amazing for our family? Like, how do I choose it? I got to keep choosing, how to make it amazing.
Yes.
It was such a good answer because it put all the choice in me. Like, I can choose to make this amazing. I can
Yeah.
choose to learn from the most terrible parts, and I can choose to learn to have patience and compassion and all the things you need when you go through hard things, no matter what your career is, right? But this is kind of
This is
just a
true.
unique one.
These are strong values that you need to have in a relationship, whatever the career is. As long as you're both invested in the relationship, you really can have amazing experiences.
Yeah. Well, and the hard things really can bring you closer. They can drive you apart if you let them. But when you get ready to join the military and you start doing your research, you read these statistics about divorce in the military, and everyone's telling you their horror stories, right? And I just thought, you know what, we have the choice here to let the hard parts of military life literally bring us closer and be stronger through it, or to drive us apart. Like, that's completely a possibility too.
That's so beautiful. So my experience with military, I know my grandpa was in the military. There's the stories of him being at Pearl Harbor when that hit, right? But I haven't had a lot of direct contact with people that are in the service. My stepsons, they both joined the Air Force. So we went to their graduation in Texas, and then they went to their different states. And we were able to interact with them over Zoom and what have you periodically, but I really don't know what happens in the world of military service. So I have a lot of respect for mothers like you and others that have been called to stay home raise a family while you support your husband
Mhm.
away.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
so that leads me into my next question.
Okay.
So having this history of being a military wife, you know that you have made these vows together. What inspired you to share your story
And become, I could become a life coach.
and become a life coach and a
Yeah.
podcaster?
Okay. Well, so in our 15 years, we've done 2 full year deployments. So the National Guard deploys for about 12 months, where some of the other branches will deploy a little more frequently, but shorter deployments. It varies. But the
Mhm.
National Guard you'll go about every 4 or 5 years for a full year. So we did one in 2013 and then in 2018. And the one in 2013 was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, and it's not a super typical story. We had some extra circumstances that made it so hard, but just in the normal set of circumstances, we had 4 little kids. So I had a 2-year-old to like a 7-year-old, right? So 4 little kids. And so that is all you need to know, really. But
Plenty. That's
uh,
a handful. Yeah.
but 2 weeks after he left, I slipped in the snow and broke my leg in 4 places and had to get multiple surgeries. I was in bed, like my leg was non-weight bearing for 6 weeks. I had to do physical therapy for 4 or 5 months. It was terrible. It was terrible. So that being said, that's not typically how deployments go, but those unique circumstances made it terrible, right? That being said, like I grew more in those moments than in, like it's like this accelerated, it's like an AP course, right? In high school, you're like, I'm getting college credit right now because it's like so hard. You grow, man. Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
for curiosity's sake, just so everyone knows, my parents ended up moving in with me because I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone my children. It was just very unusual and terrible and unique, but it sort of was my only deployment experience, right? So about halfway through, I was back to mobility and taking care of everything, and then we kind of just got through the end of the deployment, and then he came home. So as we're preparing to do it again in 2018, I logically understand that the odds of me having that kind of experience again are pretty low. Like mostly you don't break your leg. Anyway, whatever. I actually did break a rib during his second deployment, but anyway,
Did you
so
say that
I
you're breaking down a little bit, maybe?
possibly, so my brain was pretty panicked as we
Sure.
headed in next one, and whether logically or illogically, it was pretty panicked. Like, how can we go through this again? Basically, it felt like I lost a year of my life because you just put your head down and you go into survival mode and you hunker down and you get through and you push pause on everything because life is so hard. And again, it's not always as hard as it was for me, but still, I just thought that's what you do when they deploy. You just push pause on your life, make it through. And when he gets back, you can keep living again. But since I logically knew that I wouldn't break my leg, I thought, I don't want to push pause on my life. Like, I want to have a year while he's gone. I want to live this year of my life while he's gone. And my brain was just fighting me and fighting me and fighting me. Like, no, we can't do that. You can only put your head down and barely make it through. That's how you do a deployment. So I just had these conflicting stories, right? And so I started to kind of get mad about it. I was like, no, I do not want to give up another year of my life. At this point, we had 6 kids, ages like 7 months old to, I want to say 12 something. Anyway, so I had someone recommend this podcast to me. Have you ever heard of Jody Moore?
I have, yeah.
She's awesome. I love her so much. And I had several awesome people that I love and respect recommend it to me, but I had never listened to podcasts. And I was just like, I'm overwhelmed already. How could I
Right.
do more? Right.
Uh-huh.
But one day when I was kind of I do not want to let it go this way. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try Jody's podcast because all these people tell me that it helps them. I don't even know how, but it helps them. So I listened to an episode and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. It didn't thrill me. I'm not saying Jody's podcast is amazing, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind yet. I was like, fix me, Jody. And I listened to one episode and I was like, she didn't fix me. So about a couple weeks later, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this again because I need my life to go better this year while he's gone. And I listened to like 7 episodes in a row with how am I going to fix me was my mindset. Like, how can I take what she's teaching to fix my own life? I don't need Jody to fix me. I can fix me, right?
Well, so hold up. Let me pause on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think that that is a huge, powerful moment to recognize you have the
Oh, yeah.
choice. You have to
Oh,
do the work internally. I
yeah.
remember how hard it was for me to get that into my head as well. I was a lot like you, where I'm like, well, why doesn't your knowledge fix me?
Yeah. Something out here needs to make it better.
Uh-huh.
Totally. And, when we have that attitude, we consume educational content or, self-help content so differently. And
Oh,
once I
that's
switched my
interesting.
attitude, I heard it so differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can I use this to help me? It's such a different lens to consume that information through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I listened to, 5 or 6 episodes on a road trip, like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this really could help me, and it was just, I didn't even totally understand how yet, but I already felt a little lighter. I already felt like I had like a little crack of hope, like,
Little empowerment.
yeah, like this might help me. Okay. So then I started listening every day. I would go on a walk and I would listen to a couple episodes every day on the walk. And he hadn't even left yet. He was getting close to leaving. And a few weeks after that, something came up that kind of brought the deployment right to my face again, because it would kind of go, out of the forefront of my mind as we're preparing, but it's still, a month or 6 weeks out or whatever.
Which is forever away, right?
Right. Right. And
But not.
something brought it right up to my forefront again. And I felt like a totally different person as I contemplated him leaving, and nothing had changed. Like, this is what blew my mind. I didn't even realize I'd been changing all these days that I had been walking and listening to her podcast. My mindset was shifting just in tiny little ways. I call it like massaging your brain. You're like
Oh, I love
massaging,
that.
opening things up. You're
Uh-huh.
making space in your brain for possibilities,
Mm.
for solutions, for opportunities, for options, for ideas. When I was in that, put my head down and just get through it, it's like my brain was so closed, so tight, no space, no, you know what I mean?
It
And
was
so
the
it's like I
fight,
was,
flight, and freeze, right?
yes, exactly. So it was like I was bringing my head up, like, what could I do this year? How could I
Yeah.
make this go better? How can I help myself? How can I get other people, who want to help me? Because people will say, oh, let us help you. And I'm over here like, I don't even know how I would let you help me. Like, I'm so closed down, right?
Okay.
So this thing came up and I was like, I feel so different about the deployment, and it's only been a few weeks and nothing in my circumstances have changed. He's still leaving. I still have 6 kids. I still had a terrible deployment in 2013, but I feel different. So the way I say it to people is like, nothing in my life changed, but everything felt better, like possible. It was jarring. It was jarring because I didn't even realize that was going on, right? So I was like, oh, we're really on to something here. So I kept listening to her, and eventually I signed up with her. She's my life coach now, which is awesome. But
Well,
um,
congratulations on that. What
oh yeah,
amazing.
it was
Wow.
it
What
was
an
such a
amazing
beautiful
seed to
moment.
be planted and to be able to try it out
Mm,
yourself. And now she's your life coach.
yes. And
Wow.
that's exactly why I podcast. I know that you wanted to talk about that. Is
Yeah.
like in that moment when I was like, I don't even have time. Like, I'm so overwhelmed, and people are saying, try this podcast. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know. But in my brain, this little thought crept through of, I can make time for a podcast, because I knew I could listen to it while I was driving or while I was walking or while I was folding laundry. Right.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so if someone's saying, make time for a course and homework, and, I would be like, absolutely not. But a
Correct. Yeah.
free podcast, right? Like, there's no excuses for a free podcast. Anyone in any state can pretty much make a little time for a free podcast.
I
It
mean, you
doesn't,
have the choice to listen to music, you have the choice to
yeah,
watch TV or
yeah,
videos. You have the choice. And
yeah.
if you choose to make the time, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
anything
and I
can
wanted
happen.
to be able to just reach people even when they were in that low, kind of desperate place where they could still say,
Yeah.
okay, I'll try an episode. I can listen to it while I drive my kids to school today. Like, I just knew I needed to be able to reach them even when they were there. And a lot of people aren't there. They're in other, levels of
And
desperation
this is
or
okay.
feeling confident or whatever, but anyone
But
can
this is
benefit.
what
But I
I
wanted,
call
yeah.
life chapters, right?
Mhm.
where it's not your whole world, it's what you're experiencing at that time, and these are the things you get to learn from it. I mean, even being a podcaster right now, I've been a children's book illustrator, I had a
Amazing.
blog for a while, I've done some amazing things. Kels and I ran the LDS Film Festival, but they are no longer what I'm doing right now. And
Mhm.
I have had to find peace through life coaches, life coaching,
Mhm.
through life coaching, to recognize that those past experiences are not my failures,
Mm.
but that they're chapters.
Their
That
chapters
I paid for education to
and
become
seasons.
a new
Mhm.
level of me.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. Yeah. And even when we hear, mindset's everything, right? But it's really when we're in those kind of stubborn moments or low moments, we're like, mindset won't help this.
Nope, it's pretty
But
thick, isn't it?
mindset is everything, right? That's what life coaching does, is they help you take a look at your brain, and then they show it back to you,
Mm-hmm.
and they open you up, right, to what your brain can do.
Yes.
I love it. I love being a life coach. I love helping these women who feel like they have no options lift their head up again, make space in their brain, see how powerful they are, what the ways they can make their life the way they want it to be, even when he's across the ocean, even when they're afraid for his safety every day for a year. Like, it's a
So,
really powerful, that deployment bubble that you live in, because that's my focus, is helping military wives create the experience they want to experience while their loved ones are deployed. That deployment little window there is just very very powerful, and very very stressful. It can be it's unlike anything I've ever experienced.
wow. And I appreciate that you have taken your trial and triumphed over it and shown others how to make it through. Because
Yeah.
there's so much unanswered
Hmm.
things at that point.
Hmm.
Can you take us through a little bit of what it feels like to be a military wife during deployment?
Yeah, so um the 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 big goodbye, the preparing for the deployment is like, weirdly, like, the weeks before are terrible. They're weirdly really terrible, because you have all this pressure to use up every minute and treasure your time together, but you're both stressed and you're trying to make it perfect for your kids. And anyway, a lot of pressure. So it's actually like this moment of relief when they leave, because you're like, now we've started it, and now we're counting down to him coming home rather than counting down to him leaving. That relief doesn't last very long, because then you go through those first days of like, oh my gosh, they're actually gone, right? And everyone has a little different experience, but this is my experience. And then, within, it depends on who you are, but within like a week, you kind of have your routines down and your schedule down, and you've figured out how much you're going to be able to communicate with them, which varies a lot. And then from that point, it's just highs and lows. Some interesting and surprising moments throughout a deployment are, uh, lots of things will catch you off guard, right? Like, you'll be feeling so great, and then something will happen that totally triggers, like, either terrified for their safety. It's really hard when it catches you off guard. You'll be just doing your thing, and then you'll see something on the news, or someone will say something insensitive, and they don't mean to, but that happens quite a bit. And you just, if you're not, it catches you off guard, so it just takes you down. That's really hard. And then another thing is, like, I will be feeling, I'll be feeling so good, and then I'll go hang out with his family or something, and I will get so emotional and upset and mad and like miss him so much. And if I don't slow myself down, I don't even realize why I'm having this huge response. And then I realize, like, oh, when I'm around like his dad and his brothers, I like see him, right, in them, and miss
Oh,
him
yeah.
more than when I'm just like at home doing our thing.
Yeah.
So just a lot of that will kind of catch you off guard, which can be challenging. And then you'll get to that, like, the halfway point, so like 6 months in, and you're like really excited, like, oh, we're halfway. But even that moment can cause, I'm not going to say like a breakdown, but kind of a real low point, because you'll look back at how far you've come and realize you have that much left to do. So even though you're so happy that you are where you are,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you have a very tangible, uh, right in front of your face of like, that was so hard. And now I have to do that again. And before he gets home, like,
I can
whew, yeah,
feel that. I can
yeah,
feel that.
that's a
Yeah.
surprising moment. Another thing that can be, a couple other things that can be pretty challenging, um, is it's hard on the kids, right? And we as adults are able to express our feelings and often know why we're feeling the way we're feeling and ask for help. And, but kids don't know how to communicate as well. They don't know that, they're mad or sad or missing him, and they don't realize they're mad because they're missing him. They just think they're mad, right? And you're trying to help them work through it and process the emotion and be open to the emotion. But they're not really believing you. And you're like, I think you're mad because you're missing your dad. And they're like, no, I'm just mad. Like they just have very simple understanding of their complex emotions. These are very, I feel that military kids, and again, this isn't unique to military kids, just children who go through challenging things early on, they're experiencing things that their peers aren't necessarily experiencing.
Okay.
And they are experiencing emotions that they are not necessarily ready for or equipped for. And it's kind of
Yeah,
this fast track, right? And,
definitely.
and so that can be really challenging. And then the
Well, I
last,
love that you
yeah,
brought up the children's perspective of things,
um,
because I mean, even as an adult, there are times that I'm trying to figure my own emotions out. And it is so useful when I can actually put a word that describes what I'm going through. All of a sudden,
exactly.
I'm like, I feel validated and understood. And
Mhm.
children, like you said, they're going through a traumatic experience. And the only thing I can relate to is when my marriage broke up. I was married for 10 years. My daughter was in kindergarten. And now this family that I'd promised, families are forever, is
Mhm.
breaking up. And how does she express this?
Yeah.
It tears my heart apart when our kids have to go through things like that they just don't understand, and we're trying to figure it out ourselves.
Exactly.
And we feel we could go into a place of feeling so guilty that we've abandoned them in trying, like you said, going inside into survival mode, not being able to be mindful of anything but the basics of
Yeah.
taking care of that situation.
Oh, exactly. And that's exactly what I mean, where there's certain circumstances that children face, divorce or deployment, or, that really, it fast tracks them
Those are
to,
adult situations to have
yeah,
to deal with in a little
absolutely.
tiny body of limited understanding.
Yeah. And it's confusing for children when, like I said, they look around and none of their friends are going through anything like that. Like they watch, anyway. So some of the things that we would do in those situations, when I was having like a low day, I would think things like, my kids shouldn't have to go through this. But when I was having a day where I was in charge of my brain,
Huh?
I would remind myself, I would be very nice to myself when it would offer like, my kids shouldn't have to go through this. And then I would respond to my own brain, because I talk to myself all the time. That's what I do now. Anyway, I would remind myself,
It's okay to talk to yourself.
yes, I would remind myself in that moment about my kids that this isn't a problem. Meaning, this is like, they can handle this and they're growing from this. And it is, when I say it's not a problem, I mean, it's okay that they're sad. It's okay that they're mad. It's
Yeah.
okay that they wish they weren't going through this. It's okay that they wish dad was home. Like,
Wow.
none of that means anything has gone wrong. And
Hmm.
that was really powerful for me. And it also helped me show them what I was feeling, because our tendency is to hide.
Yeah.
If I'm
To be
having
the
an
strong
emotional
one,
day,
right?
I have to be strong for my kids. Don't let them see
Yeah.
I'm crying. But I
Hmm.
would just cry right in front of them and say, like, I miss dad so much today. And we would just be emotional together. Like that level of emotional intelligence is really not familiar to a lot of us, especially like to set that example for our kids. Like, I feel like that gave us so many opportunities to show them, like, there's nothing wrong with negative emotion. There's nothing like unhealthy or unstable about having good days and bad, and letting people see it and talk about it with each other. And when they would say to me, like, I'm so sad, I just miss him, I would just, instead of being like, oh, it's okay, don't miss him, I would say, like, I'm so sad too. I miss him all
Wow.
the time. I'm missing him right now. I wish he was here. And we would just be sad together. Like, it was incredible.
Like when you said that you cry with your children, like I felt that. It hit me hard. Even in my own story, and this is all I can relate to, right?
Right, for
In
sure.
my own story, trying to be the strong one and hiding everything. What would have happened if I allowed myself to cry in front of my children, to let them see, like, I'm having a hard time with this story and I don't know what to do?
Yeah,
How much closer we could be because I didn't have to be the strong one. I didn't have to be the superpower Wonder Woman. Not I embrace Wonder Woman in my life. I love her vulnerability. I love that she chooses to stand in strength, love, and grace, whatever the
mm,
situation is. She is she is valuable in my life, right? But there are superheroes that tend to look like they've nothing affects them, that we
yeah,
can't relate to. And I think sometimes when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, that we try to be that superhero and not realize that that's actually the vulnerability that is more valuable at
exactly.
those times.
Yeah, I love to work with my clients because they're very hard on themselves when they have really bad days or when they cry in front of their kids. And I
Mhm.
say, what if crying in front of your kids is like the strongest thing you could do?
Mhm.
Like that, we're not used to thinking of vulnerability and emotion as strong. It's strength,
Yeah.
right? Like to just stand in that and to experience those emotions. And
Be
and
human, right?
exactly. And what a powerful example to set for your kids because as humans, we're used to looking around and thinking everyone has it together but me, right?
It's
And
true.
kids don't
We
verbalize it
compare
quite that way.
ourselves to
Oh yeah.
everybody else's world, right?
Yeah. And all that being said, I still have the gut reaction to hide my emotions from my kids, even though we do this now a lot. And I've been coaching for years and all the things. And I will, I can remember a few months ago, I was crying. It was Sunday and like my tears were coming. And so I kind of like beeline to my bedroom because I thought, I don't want to like talk to my kids or explain to them I'm crying or whatever. Like I was just like mad and whatever. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's my old pattern. That's my old pattern where I run away when I'm emotional.
Yeah.
And instead I just came back out
Mm.
and I just was emotional right in front of them. Like
Mm.
and I don't do it every time, but I try to, and I watch myself and the old patterns play out and the new ones and to show them like, this is me crying, being mad, being unhappy with this, that happened, just communicating about it. And I think that just brings that emotional intelligence to children,
Yeah.
at whatever level they're ready to receive it. But
So I have been able to listen to a couple of your podcasts. And the thing that I love about you is you are so approachable. You're real, you're raw, you tell the stories from your point of view, and here's some tips and tools that I've learned. And the thing is, you don't have to be in the military to appreciate the stories of the struggles of just being in this life, married,
yeah,
single, mother, no children. It's the turns of life that we all experience.
yeah, the human experience.
The human experience, exactly. And so I would admonish my listeners to check out your podcast. I would love, and the end of this recording will go into how to reach out to you and your podcast and what have you. But I would love at this time for you to dive into your experiences with life coaching. What's what's something that someone will experience that they come to you as their life coach? And what have you experienced in tools of change for others?
Awesome. Yeah. So I've been coaching since 2019, I want to say, maybe 2018. Yeah, 2018.
Okay.
And I started during his deployment. That's how far up I was able to bring my head is I started a coaching practice, right? Rather than just like, let's get through, right? And
Ah,
I wanted to just start first to make sure I loved it before I wanted to go to the life coach school, which is where I paid to certify. That's where Jody Moore went.
the life coach?
It's called the life coach school.
Oh, okay.
So
That's actually a life coach school.
yeah. So it's Brooke
Okay.
Castillo's life coach school. And I loved everything Jody was teaching. And I knew that she's certified there. So I was like, that's where I want to go.
Oh,
But I
yep.
wanted to make sure I loved it first before I, invested. And I did. I started coaching, loving it. I was like, okay, it's time. So I went to life coach school, and that's a year-long program, and got my podcast started and started working with clients. And in the beginning, I was just coaching anyone. And then I was able to narrow it down into my niche of working with military wives. But I will say, just like you said, I speak to military wives, I coach military wives, but the concepts are always for everybody. So I recommend my podcast to everyone. I was like, you don't have to be a military wife to enjoy and benefit from this, because one of my kind of little, what's the word, like perspectives or whatever, is that I am a military wife coach, and we hardly ever talk about the military, honestly. I know that sounds kind of weird, but in most of the military wife or life military family resources that I consume, it has very valuable information about like the logistics of military life. But there's definitely some out there, but few are really going after what's hard about military life. They're talking about, here's tips for moving, here's tips for letter writing. Like that's all really, really good stuff, right? Like we need that stuff too, but I want to get to like the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
I'm the military life coach who hardly talks about the military, which is why anyone listening to my podcast enjoys it, right? Okay. So started the podcast, started coaching. Oh yeah, sorry. I'm going to answer your actual question. And your question was, what is it like to work with a life coach, right?
Yeah.
Basically. So my favorite things to help my clients with is, I'll just kind of list them off here and help you see. What I love to start with is, I love to start with understanding and awareness. We don't understand our brain, and we don't have a lot of awareness around what we're thinking and how what we're thinking is creating our life, right? So that's kind of the basics. So you start to just learn how to listen to your brain and watch it and break it up into something that's very observable. We don't observe our brains very much. I wasn't all my life, basically. We kind of think we are until we really start doing it. And then we're like, oh, I had no idea I was thinking that on repeat, right?
Oh, interesting. Because we're on autopilot,
Yeah,
would
a
you
lot of
say?
it goes on in our subconscious, and we need to just pull it up just a little bit into our awareness, and not everything we're thinking, but whatever we're working on, we want to pull up into our awareness what
Okay.
we're actually thinking about that thing, right?
Oh,
The next steps I love to take with my clients are to decrease, this is an important word to me, decrease certain things in their life, like decrease overwhelm, decrease drama, decrease the misery we're creating for ourselves. And I love the word decrease, because I'm not on a mission for you to be a robot and to never be dramatic and to never feel overwhelmed. I just want to show you why you're overwhelmed, that you're creating a lot of it, which can be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow.
uh-huh.
The good news is if we're creating it, we can fix it, right? If the problem is here, then the solution is here, right? And so
Wow.
I love to show them, just take your overwhelm from 90%, where you feel like you're breathing through a straw out the water, right?
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
just bring it down to like 50% overwhelm by watching for these patterns and these thought processes, and starting to make little adjustments here, and just bring it down 10% at a time until you're down to just like 50%. And then the water's just like here, right? And then eventually maybe it'll get down even a little more, but we just want to not be like breathing through a straw, right?
So can you take us through that process? So at a space of barely breathing through the straw, I mean, the only thing I can respect, or the only thing that I can associate to that would be maybe an anxiety attack,
Yeah.
right?
Well, or
You're
even
just
living
feeling
in
like
survival
everything
mode.
is just so overwhelming. It's pulling your shoulders down, you're underwater, like you
Yeah.
said, and barely able to breathe. So I'm at a, what did you say,
Like
70%?
like 90% or whatever your numbers
90%.
are, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
How do I get from 70 or 90% down to a retainable amount?
Absolutely. Um, some of the things that will bring you to that 90% might be living in survival mode, might be, going through just really challenging things. But even that, sometimes we go through a challenging thing and then we kind of stay in survival mode, even when we don't need
Yeah.
to, right? Because
Mhm.
that's
It
kind of
becomes
our
our
new,
comfortable cocoon, right?
it's like our new way we operate, right?
Yeah.
So like I already mentioned, the awareness and the understanding is already just going to take it down at least 10, 15, 20%. Now, again, these numbers are not mathematical, right? I just say numbers so you can kind of get that illustration, right? So being unaware of what's going on in our brain is very disconcerting. Like, I'm stressed and I have no idea why. That takes you up that 10%. So if you're stressed, but you know why, you don't even have to stop being stressed, but now you know why. Right. And it's what we're thinking. It's our attitude. It's our mindset. It's our lens. It's the way we're processing our experiences in our lives that so the way I like to say it is I'm feeling stressed because I'm thinking really stressful thoughts. Right. That's really what it comes down to. It's mindset. It's always mindset. And I have a model that I use in all my coaching that Brooke teaches at her school. It's a self-coaching model that is, your circumstances are all the facts of life, right? Your thoughts are what you're thinking about your circumstances. You feel things based on your thoughts. You take action from those feelings, and then you get the results in your life. And it goes in that order every time. And we don't need to get into that today because it's
pretty
awesome.
complicated.
It's awesome. It's the foundation of everything I do in my coaching, where I help them understand the model, and that helps you understand your brain. But we're going to not go there today. But so the awareness and understanding is already going to bring it down again, like 10, 15%.
Just being aware of it, that I'm stressed.
Yeah. Or like anything, right? Like the one I work on with myself a lot is that my children's behavior annoys me sometimes, like whether it's just silly stuff, like the noises they make, or misbehavior, or like coloring on my walls, right? I feel very annoyed. And when I used to not understand my brain, I would think I'm feeling annoyed because they drew on my walls, right? And you would think that seems very straightforward, right? But then if that's the case, the only way I get to not feel annoyed is if my kids don't draw on my walls, and kids draw on walls, right? Like eventually they stop, right?
I drew on walls. Did you draw on walls?
I did, exactly. And when they draw on walls, we put them in timeout and whatever, make them clean the wall, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't care that they're drawing on the wall. But the step we're missing is my child draws on a wall, and then I think they have to stop. They shouldn't be doing that. This is terrible. Why did they do that? Right? I'm thinking all these very annoyed thoughts, and then I feel very annoyed.
And no other child does this.
Right?
Only my child.
My friends' kids don't, my nieces don't, whatever, right? And then I feel annoyed. And if I don't, so it's okay that I feel annoyed, but I just want to remind myself I'm feeling annoyed because I'm thinking very annoyed thoughts. I could also think kids draw on walls and stick them in timeout and not feel annoyed at all. But instead I'm thinking they've got to stop, right? Or whatever is the thought that is creating my feeling of annoyed. So just that level of awareness right there, I don't even have to stop feeling annoyed. I just know my annoyed thoughts are creating my feeling of being annoyed, right? So that's that awareness.
Okay. Now I follow you.
Right? Do you see what I'm saying there? Just understanding my brain and the way it works, and how I have a thought problem, and and that's totally fine. Just like there's nothing wrong with being emotional or whatever, right? I can just still be annoyed. But if I want to, all it needs is a thought solution too. I have a thought problem. If I want to stop feeling annoyed, the solution is not my child stopping drawing on the walls. The solution is my mindset, my thoughts, my attitude towards what's happening. So that's super powerful right there. That and also that ownership and acceptance of I create this, and that's totally fine, right? And then the final piece that I love to work with my clients on, and also will bring this down, the percentages that we talked about, is just being completely in love with yourself. Like that is one of my biggest missions, is helping people. We don't jump right to being in love with ourselves, but so many of us are at odds with ourselves. We're at odds with our brains. We're at odds with our self-esteem, our self-image, our brain. Like we are not friends with ourselves. If the way we think about ourselves,
right?
If we were thinking about another person that way, we would like not spend time with them, right? We would think.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yes.
I've experienced that.
Absolutely. And we all do.
Things that we think about ourselves. It's so easy to tear ourselves down openly in front of someone else. Yeah. When we walk into the bathroom, we can easily step into a place of, oh my gosh, I look horrible. Look at my hair. What a horrible day. Look how ugly I am. Why do I have so much weight on me? Blah, 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 blah. It's so easy to rip ourselves open.
It's kind of our brain's default, which is why we just need to understand that and learn how to work with it. So this is a bit of a process I go through with my clients, but I start with, again, the awareness of them realizing what they're thinking about themselves and their current relationship with themselves, their current relationship with their brain. And I help them see how easily they admire other people and are grateful for other people and are, just the way they think about other people, particularly close people who are close to them, but
Yeah.
how they don't think that way about themselves when we're like
Mm-hmm.
we're our number one relationship, and we ignore it, and
Yeah.
we minimize it, and we treat ourselves terribly up here, right? And sometimes physically too, right? So when we get to that point where we go from, I now understand what my relationship is with myself, I understand what I could work towards and make it be, and I see benefits along the way as I start to treat myself a little better, right? Those
Yeah.
percentages. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to get you all the way over to being like madly in love with yourself. I'm madly in love with myself. And that's not available. I mean, it's available to everybody, but some people get there a little quicker. Some people, that's a really far reach, but there's so many steps along the way. I want to at least bring you all the way to like partnering with yourself. Like you're on the same page as yourself and your brain and your partners, instead of like, enemies is kind of a strong word, but
Well, you got each other's back, right?
yeah, I want you to at least be a partner with yourself. If you can't get all the way to madly in love, I think madly in love is so fun. And that's the goal, but at least to a partner, right? And
You
so
walk past that mirror and you look back and you go,
hey girl,
oh,
oh yeah, or like just being such a fan of yourself and your ideas. And because what this gives you when you're at least a partner with yourself, if not madly in love, is that you're going to make mistakes because you're human. You're going to screw it all up, but you're nice to yourself. Like that seems so simple, but being nice to yourself all along the way, for the ups and downs, changes everything, like everything. So kind of all those components combined, there's a lot of other, a lot of branches of that, but
this
that's
is why
kind of
it's
some
called
of the
life
core.
coaching, right?
Yes, this is some of the
Because you've
core
got
of just
life to experience this.
understanding your brain, partnering with it, and just decreasing. Like I have decreased my annoyance for my kids because I don't want to be an annoyed mom. But sometimes I still feel annoyed, and I'm not mean to myself when I am. And I realize it's not a problem. I just think, oh, I'm just thinking annoying thoughts. And then I feel annoyed at my children. But I used to be annoyed all the time. Now I'm only annoyed 40% of the time or whatever. Again, the numbers don't really matter, but I've had a major decrease in annoyance. I've had a major decrease in resentment. That was another one that I dealt with so much in military life, was that without even wanting to, I felt so resentful of my husband being gone so much. I felt so resentful towards the military. I felt so resentful towards couples who got to spend all their time together. And that's not me. I didn't want to feel that way, but I had no idea how to change it. And through this whole process, I'm able to decrease my resentment to a very manageable place, to a very human place, right? I just feel resentful sometimes. I know I create it. It's totally okay. I used to feel resentful all the time and feel like I didn't have any control over it. Like I just woke up, oh, I noticed I'm resentful today. Like it just happens to me, but I realized I was creating it all. Anyway, I get really excited and then I start yelling and then I never stop talking.
Well, I can feel your passion about this new journey that you're taking and the way that it can affect and touch the lives of others around you. It's interesting for me also to look back on my own journey of self-love, right? And I love that you go into the space that it's not easy sometimes. And so what are some baby steps that you would recommend in finding like with yourself?
That's a great question.
And then we'll probably need to wrap up pretty soon.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
we
We're
could
almost
talk till
at an hour.
3 o'clock in the morning. I
Well, we can
know
keep
that we could.
going and going. Definitely, the way I always start is with awareness, like I already mentioned, because we don't even know how to work on liking ourselves if we don't know the thoughts we're even currently thinking about ourselves. That if we've kind of shoved them down there on that subconscious level. And it's like, have you ever, when you watch the news and there's the yellow strip at the bottom, that ticker tape or whatever the words are, and it's
Okay.
talking about another news story down there, right?
True.
There's the
Yeah.
people on the video, and then there's this line saying, over in this country, this happened, and it's just running this other story down here. And that's where I feel like so many of our thoughts are, is on that ticker tape.
Is that maybe the subconscious?
Yeah, it's basically our
Okay.
subconscious, right? But that's a really important story. right? That's what we're currently thinking about ourselves. So I always start with awareness. So the baby steps are just to start to open up to your thoughts, to get curious, to just begin to observe with compassion and
Oh,
curiosity and kindness of like, I see now. I see when I like watch yourself make a mistake and then watch this little ticker tape play out of the way you think about yourself when you make a mistake, or the way you get into a social situation and you start to judge yourself, or, and it's playing down here and we just want to bring it up. And that can be a pretty challenging process, but we can't improve it till we bring it up and we know it. And then we start to adjust it, just little adjustments. Like it's like, another analogy. I like to give analogies, right? Like the ticker tape. And then another analogy I love to use is like a bowling alley. Once we've brought it, once we've brought it up, it's like we have bumpers. So our ball is going all around and we just never let it go into the gutter anymore, right? Like we have these bumpers that kind of like, oh, I started heading towards the gutter, but I watched myself do it this time. I now know I'm headed towards the gutter and I'm thinking these things and I've got a bumper up now. And so then it just kind of bumps off there and heads back to where I want to be thinking. And then something else will happen and I'll start to head the way I used to head. And I just have made these baby steps to think more the way I want to be thinking in just incremental, slight adjustments. And in my opinion, this is why our efforts often are relatively unsuccessful and we're not able to sustain them because we think, okay, I want to love myself more. So we try to just jam some positive thoughts on top of that ticker tape that we never even brought up to our consciousness. We're just like, I'm going to look in the mirror and tell myself I'm beautiful. But in the ticker tape is saying like, you're disgusting, you don't deserve it, and like, we don't even know, like we don't consciously
yeah.
really have an awareness of the ticker tape. So then when we look in the mirror and we say, I'm beautiful, which is an incredible action, and you really should be doing it, it's not supported by your thoughts. It's not supported by the true story, or the current story, not true story, but the current story you have of yourself, the current thoughts you think about yourself. So to get towards that like of yourself and then partner with yourself and then love with yourself, it starts with the awareness. It starts with just those gentle, loving adjustments and just a lot of patience, and try and just not shoving positive on top and letting all the negatives stay.
Okay.
We make a little space for, I'm a human. I have a lot of, I have a tendency to judge myself. I have a tendency to think poorly of myself. I'm gaining awareness around that. We almost like narrate that to
Yeah.
ourselves. And we say, here's what I'm working on thinking instead. I have a tendency to think this, but I'm working on thinking something a little more like this. Like we're not going to go all the way from here, to the other end of the spectrum. I'm working on replacing this thought with just like, like I hate my body, to like, I have a body. Like there's
Yeah.
my body, there's my human body. Just kind of that, almost a little more neutral,
Just
and
being aware of it.
then we work towards to liking and then loving
Mm.
it all.
I would use that analogy as like going into a gym, right? Just
Yes.
starting with the little tiny weights
Yeah.
until you can feel that strength grow and then go to the next level. And that's okay. Don't expect yourself to go in and pick up the heaviest weight that's in the gym and be a professional, right?
You're building a
Take
brand
off your
new I
time.
love me muscle, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's a brand new muscle. If you haven't had
Yeah.
strengthened over time, it's a brand new muscle. And if you just try to jam some positive thoughts on it, it's like going and picking up a big weight, and
Mhm.
the muscles aren't ready for that, right? You got to
This
just
is
start
true.
small. Mhm.
Yeah. And I know for me, in being in the podcast world, it is easy to go into a space of imposter syndrome. Do you know what
Mm,
I'm talking about?
absolutely.
Like, who am I to be gathering this message, or somebody else would be doing a much better job of interviewing, things like that. It's so easy to shut ourselves down when we're doing something, first of all, that we've never been taught to do, and we're exercising those muscles.
Mm,
And I have found some graceful statements in my day when I'm going through that. I
mm.
recognize that heartbeat, right? That could make me go into a place of being so nervous that I can't function.
Oh,
And I have learned, and I'm so grateful for life coaches like my dad, actually, who taught me that the subconscious does not know the difference between anxiety and excitement. It's the
Mm,
same energy. Just
absolutely.
like fear and faith, it's the same energy. So I get to choose. So when I feel that pitter patter and I feel like the world is coming down on me and I'm going to fail and I go into that space, I choose to breathe and realize I am excited.
Mm.
And that's what I focus on. What am I excited about? And I start asking myself those kind of questions. What am I excited that's going to happen? What are we going to talk about? Who are we going to touch? What stories am I going to gather? This is
That's so good.
there's some power tools that I've learned in my own life, and it's through life coaches like you. Jesse, I really appreciate you being here. One question that has come to mind that I'd like to touch on. I know for me personally, I've had some friends that have dealt with some of the PTSD that happens in the military with their husbands. And I also have some friends that they've really kind of lost their marriage because of that PTSD. Have you experienced any of that? Is that something that you touch on?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a very real thing. Mental health can really suffer in the military lifestyle, particularly for the soldiers. I mean, as well as the spouses, right?
Yeah.
Um, so personally, in my own marriage, my husband dealt with a little bit of PTSD after his second deployment. It wasn't super severe. We've had lots of friends who have dealt with it at a quite more severe level, which is so challenging and can be incredibly hard on the marriage relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like what we already talked about, where when our kids are really suffering, we want to fix it, right? So
Mm.
when if our husband is going through his thing, we want to just fix it, but it's not going to get fixed like immediately. It takes time. It takes I always adamantly say, if anyone's dealing with PTSD, they need to be seeing a therapist, need to be seeing licensed, trained professionals. Now, while I'm a certified life coach, the line that I draw, I can absolutely work with a woman who's married to a man who is dealing with PTSD. But
Okay.
if the woman had PTSD, or if I was working with a man, I would send them to a therapist, because the line that
Mhm.
I draw for coaching is coaches work generally with a relatively functioning life and help you make it more of what you want it to be. Where if you are in a dysfunctional place, and I use that word very neutrally, I don't use that word can carry a little weight for some people, function and dysfunction. But what I mean is, like, if you're in the throes of PTSD, you might not be able to hold down a job. You might not be able to, or if you're like so depressed, you can't mother, or right. Like, that's the dysfunction I'm talking about. Your
Okay.
life is not functioning at the level that you want it to be. That would be when you would need to go to more like a therapist or a counselor. So like I was saying, my husband experienced some PTSD, and it took him a little while to figure it out. He didn't actually like witness any combat, but he saw people, soldiers who were hurt right at, like, he Black Hawk helicopters will often be the medical transportation to bring an injured person wherever they need to be. So he would see injured people. He didn't see the combat. And then one more layer that he had to really realize was that living in a combat zone, whether you see the combat or not, really does something to your brain. So that once he was able to kind of open up to the fact that how could this be PTSD? I didn't witness any combat. He through he and I working together, and then him working with a therapist. He actually did horse therapy, which was really awesome. He
Oh,
was able to
interesting.
open up some of that and realize, like, I do have a level of PTSD from living in a combat zone for so long, from witnessing injuries, from just my brain would just imagine, oh, at any moment there could be combat. Right? That does a lot to your brain. And anyway, the therapist was incredible. And being the spouse of someone who's going through that, the
Yeah.
main things that I work with my clients on are just similar to what when it's your child in pain, is that you don't need to fix it. You just need to be there for them while they fix it. Well, and it just takes time. And you work on you so that you can be the person you want to be with them, right? And it's incredibly challenging.
And before we go, Jesse, is there anything else you want to add?
I actually do want to just tell one more quick story before we wrap up, that I think that you know about Stephanie, but I don't know if you've connected all the details, and it ties into what we've been talking about today. So at the beginning of the episode, Stephanie said we were introduced to each other through a mutual friend. And that mutual friend was actually one of the keys to my super successful deployment from our second deployment. So when I was in that process of lifting my head up and realizing I had options and solutions, and that I could make my life, I wasn't just at the whim of the deployment. I could make my life what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
One day I was scrolling Facebook, and I read something about like getting a nanny, and I was like, oh, if only, right? Like this abstract idea of having regular childcare. And part of the reason it felt so abstract to me is I am a stay-at-home mom, and I don't have my kids in daycare. I don't, like, what stay-at-home mom needs a nanny, right?
Yeah.
I'm the nanny.
Right.
But because my brain was in that space of openness, I started realizing, like, why not get a nanny? I don't have my partner, my parenting partner. Why not get a nanny? It doesn't matter that I'm a stay-at-home mom. I can get a nanny, right? So then the second obstacle was like, oh, well, nannies are expensive, right? Like my brain wants to give me all these obstacles, right? We don't have a lot of room in the budget for like a nanny, especially, if it's for almost like a want, not a need. Like I want a nanny, but I don't really need one, right? So then I just went to work solving that, because my brain was in a space. It was in a problem-solving space, right? So I decided I was going to get a live-in nanny, and I would trade her room and board for like 15 hours of work a week, whether it be childcare or house cleaning or both. And we ended up through a whole process. I found Amber, who is our mutual friend, and she lived with me for over a year, maybe 14 or so months. She moved in a little bit before he left and stayed a little bit after he got home, because we like went on a trip, just the two of us, after he got home. And it was a game changer.
Oh,
She had so much fun living with us. We had so much fun having her there. We would just sit down and schedule out her few hours throughout the week. And then she got to go have her whole own life that she was doing. And I got regular help all week long. I got to travel. I would book her for bigger things, right? I would say like, okay, I want to go on a trip, so I want you for like 3 full days, right? And that would be like a separate thing. Just because I had a nanny, I was unstoppable. So I wanted to share that, because these are the solutions you come up with when your brain is open and in problem-solving mode, and yeah, and like when things feel possible. And I just think it's such a cool story, because it changed the deployment for me, like changed it. And it's the person that we both know is my nanny. So
amazing.
Anyway, I just wanted to tell that story really quick.
Oh, I'm so glad that you did. And it's really good to recognize when you're in a healthy place that you can make healthy decisions. And that brings me to wanting to introduce my audience to your podcast. As you can tell, I have fallen in love with Jessie, and I'm sure that you have as well. She's vulnerable, she's approachable, she is down to earth, and she has some beautiful knowledge through the experiences that she's had. She's chosen to triumph over those trials. And I'm so honored to know you and to have this time with you. Really quickly, can you share with my audience where they can listen to your podcast, or if they feel connected with you, that they reach out to you and have you as a life coach?
Absolutely. Okay. My podcast is called Simply Resilient, and it's on all major podcast platforms. And again, it's for military wives, but really anyone can benefit. And the best place to reach me would just be my website, simplyresilient.net, or email me at jessie@simplyresilient.net.
Beautiful. And if I remember right, you have a free download. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you go on my website, I have over 100 episodes on my podcast. So I just recently created a podcast roadmap, because sometimes when you come on a podcast brand new and there's so many episodes and you don't even know where to start, right?
Yes.
So I give you like my top 12 podcast episodes that I would listen to first if I were brand new to the podcast.
Oh.
And the order I would have you listen to in them as well. My podcast is not one that you have to like start at episode 1 and move through. You can just peruse it and listen to anything that's interesting to you. But if you kind of want my guided top 12 episodes, you just go on my website, simplyresilient.net, and click on the podcast tab, and it will pop up to just get that download. It's just a 1-page free printable. I have a couple other free resources on there. One is on the homepage. It's 10 tips for thriving during deployment, which will be quite a bit more specific to military wives. And then I do like a monthly newsletter and some different things like that. So lots to find on my beautiful brand new website that I just designed. I designed it early this year, but someone else built it for me because they're amazing and I didn't want to learn how to do that.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing this Memorial weekend with me and being able to give others a message of hope and knowing that there are resources to help them through some tough times with deployment and especially being a woman who understands and sharing your heart. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, share, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Please comment because I would love to hear about what you think and what you want to see in the future. I'm no therapist, but I am your host, Stephanie Goodman.